Judge Marcus Hall was known across the state as a man of quiet strength, a respected black judge. He had a reputation for fairness and an unshakable sense of dignity. His courtroom was a place where justice spoke louder than politics, and many admired him for refusing to bend under pressure. But one late evening, as he drove home from a long day in court, Marcus's life took a turn no one could have predicted. His car rolled to a stop at a busy intersection in Brookhaven, a city still divided by old prejudices. Blue lights flashed behind him. Chief of Police Karen Doyle herself stepped out of the patrol vehicle. Tall, commanding, and notorious for her iron grip over the department, Doyle had long carried an aura of untouchable power. She didn't usually involve herself in traffic stops, but tonight was different. Marcus lowered his window calmly. "Good evening, Chief. Is there a problem?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed. Instead of answering, she barked, "Step out of the car!" The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk sensed tension brewing. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Marcus stepped out, keeping his composure. He identified himself respectfully. "I'm Judge Hall, returning from the courthouse." But Doyle's jaw clenched. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, grabbing his arm with unnecessary force. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the city's highest-ranking law enforcer shoved the state's most respected judge against his own car. The cameras caught every second. The people who witnessed it knew this was more than an arrest. This was an assault. And the moment Chief Doyle laid her hands on Judge Marcus Hall, the fuse of a scandal was lit, one that would shake the entire city to its core. The scene unfolded with an intensity no one could ignore. Judge Marcus Hall stood firm, though his suit was rumpled from being shoved against his car. Chief Doyle pressed her authority, but the murmurs from the growing crowd grew louder. "Isn't that Judge Hall?" someone whispered. "That's him. Why is she treating him like that?" another voice added. Phones angled closer, capturing every detail. Some live-streamed on social media, their feeds filling with shocked comments. The city had seen police officers overstep boundaries before, but to see their chief manhandler sitting judge, it was unheard of. "Chief Doyle, please," Marcus said evenly, his voice calm but carrying. "I assure you, I've broken no law. There must be a misunderstanding." But Doyle's face hardened. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps prejudice, but she doubled down. "Keep your hands where I can see them," she barked, her grip tightening on his wrist. Gasps turned into shouts. A young woman yelled, "We're recording everything." A man shouted back, "Let him go, that's Judge Hall." Doyle ignored them. Her authority had rarely been questioned in public, and now, surrounded by flashing cameras and a restless crowd, she chose intimidation over reason. Marcus refused to resist. He knew better than anyone how fast restraint could be twisted into resisting arrest. Instead, he stood silently, letting dignity shield him. His silence spoke louder than anger ever could. Within minutes, the live stream had spread beyond the block. By the time Doyle attempted to push Marcus toward her vehicle, thousands of viewers were already watching. And among them were city council members, lawyers, and reporters. The chief thought she was making an example of a black man on the street. But in reality, she was destroying her own career. One reckless action at a time. By sunrise, the footage had spread like wildfire. What began as a shaky live stream on one teenager's phone had been clipped, shared, and broadcast across national platforms. The video was unmistakable. Chief Karen Doyle, in full uniform, aggressively shoving Judge Marcus Hall against his car, ignoring his calm identification, and treating him like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses. News anchors replayed the clip on morning shows, voices heavy with disbelief. "Viewers, what you're watching is a city's top law enforcer physically assaulting one of the state's most respected judges. The incident has sparked outrage." In Brookhaven, the courthouse buzzed with shock. Clerks whispered in hallways, lawyers gathered in tight circles, and even senior judges exchanged looks of alarm. Many had disagreed with Doyle's methods in the past, but this was undeniable. Marcus, meanwhile, sat quietly in his chambers. He hadn't spoken to reporters, hadn't posted a word online. His silence made the public even more curious, even more enraged on his behalf. On social media, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Justice for Judge Hall, hashtag Chief Doyle exposed, hashtag Accountability Now. Community leaders demanded answers. Activist groups organized emergency rallies in front of City Hall. Within 24 hours, the mayor's office was under intense pressure to respond. Chief Doyle, however, held a press conference of her own. Standing stiffly at the podium, she insisted, "Judge or not, no one is above the law. I acted on suspicion, and I stand by my decision." But her words only fueled the fire. Clips of her statement were paired with slow-motion footage of her shoving Judge Hall, spreading across every major platform. She thought defiance would protect her reputation. Instead, it painted her as arrogant and set the stage for her downfall. Brookhaven erupted. Within hours of Doyle's press conference, protests lined the steps of City Hall. Signs rose high, no justice, no peace, and judges deserve dignity too. The chant that thundered through the streets was unmistakable: Doyle must go. Marcus Hall remained silent, refusing interviews. That silence became a symbol. To many it was proof of his dignity, and a stark contrast to Doyle's defensive arrogance. News vans swarmed the city. Commentators debated openly. Chief Doyle crossed a line no one should cross, one analyst declared. She assaulted a sitting judge in broad daylight, another added. Even retired police officers voiced concern. Leadership means restraint, one said on live TV. What she did wasn't law enforcement, it was humiliation. Inside the police department, whispers spread. Some officers who had quietly resented Doyle's heavy-handed leadership now felt emboldened. Leaks began to surface, old complaints, misconduct files that had been buried, stories of Doyle's temper behind closed doors. The mayor, under crushing political pressure, announced an independent review into the incident. But few doubted what the outcome would be. The evidence was too damning, too public. Meanwhile, Marcus received visits from colleagues, pastors, and even former defendants who once stood in his courtroom. They told him the same thing: you handled yourself with grace. For Marcus, it wasn't about grace, it was about principle. If I lose my dignity in the face of injustice, he quietly told a friend, then I lose more than any title can give me. The public admired him more than ever, but for Chief Doyle, admiration had turned into disgust. The city she once ruled with fear now demanded her resignation, and soon her downfall would become inevitable. The State Attorney General's office wasted no time. By the end of the week, a formal investigation into Chief Doyle was underway. Subpoenas were issued, demanding bodycam footage, radio logs, and officer reports from the night she stopped Judge Hall. But the problem was glaring. Doyle's bodycam had been malfunctioning. Conveniently, it had recorded nothing. The excuse only deepened suspicion. Investigators interviewed witnesses who had been on the sidewalk that night. One by one, they described the same scene: a calm, cooperative Judge Hall being treated like a dangerous criminal. Their testimonies painted a picture Doyle could not escape. Meanwhile, the leaked misconduct files gained traction. News outlets uncovered at least 7 prior complaints against Doyle, citizens who had accused her of excessive force, intimidation, and abuse of authority. None had stuck, because each had been quietly dismissed or buried. Now, with the world watching, those complaints roared back to life. The city council held an emergency session. Some council members, once her allies, now distanced themselves. Leadership requires accountability, one said firmly. Brookhaven cannot move forward under a cloud of abuse. Behind closed doors, Doyle raged. Her office echoed with slammed doors and shouted curses. For years, she had been untouchable, the iron fist of the department. Now she felt her grip slipping, her empire crumbling with every headline. Judge Hall, however, remained patient. He made no public statements, but his silence was not weakness. It was a steady reminder of the dignity Doyle had failed to show. The investigator's interim report concluded with words that shook the city: there is credible evidence that Chief Doyle engaged in misconduct unbecoming of her office and violated both the rights and dignity of Judge Marcus Hall. The walls were closing. Chief Doyle sat in her office, staring at the framed commendations that once symbolized her dominance. Each plaque, each medal, now felt like a lie. The walls seemed to close in as the voices outside grew louder, calls for her resignation echoing across the city. Her command staff grew uneasy. Some who once followed her orders without question now avoided eye contact. At roll call, whispers circulated: "She's finished. Did you see the report?" The judge didn't even fight back. She just lost it. The police union, initially silent, released a statement: "We support accountability at every level of leadership." Doyle knew what that meant. They were pulling away, leaving her isolated. Meanwhile, Judge Hall continued his quiet routine. He presided over hearings with the same composure he always had. Litigants noticed his calm demeanor, his refusal to show anger. For the public, it was a stark contrast: a man wronged, yet still upholding justice without spite. National media took notice. Morning shows played side-by-side clips. Doyle shoving the judge against his car versus Hall calmly ruling in court the next day. Who truly embodies justice? One host asked rhetorically. The answer was obvious. Behind the scenes, city officials discussed succession plans. Who would replace Doyle if she resigned, or worse, if she was removed? Her reign of fear had left a void, and no one wanted her shadow hanging over Brookhaven anymore. Still, Doyle refused to step down. "They want me gone?" she snarled to her deputy. "Let them try. I built this department with my own hands." But even as she clung to her pride, the cracks in her armor widened. Allies abandoned her. Enemies smelled blood. Her downfall wasn't just possible anymore, it was inevitable. The city was divided, but not evenly. On the courthouse steps, protesters gathered daily, waving signs and chanting for Doyle's removal. Families, church leaders, students, all stood united. They weren't just demanding justice for Judge Hall, they were demanding a new era for Brookhaven. Media trucks lined the streets. Every word from city officials, every whisper from the police department was dissected live on air. "This is bigger than one bad decision," one commentator declared. "This is about whether power can go unchecked." Meanwhile, Doyle tried to rally support. She appeared on a local radio show, her voice clipped with controlled fury. "I will not be bullied out of my position by a media circus," she insisted. "I made a judgment call. That's what leaders do." But callers flooded the station with outrage. "Judgment call?" one woman snapped. "You assaulted a sitting judge for no reason." Another caller, a retired officer, added, "Leaders don't humiliate the very people they're sworn to respect." Clips of those call-ins went viral, further damaging Doyle's reputation. Judge Hall still refused interviews. But when he was spotted leaving church on Sunday morning, cameras caught his quiet words, "I place my trust in the system. Justice must be bigger than one man, or it means nothing at all." That single sentence swept across social media. People replayed it, quoting it in captions. His restraint became a rallying cry, proof that dignity was stronger than force. City Hall received over 50,000 petitions in less than a week, demanding Doyle's resignation. National civil rights groups announced they were sending representatives to Brookhaven. It was no longer just a local scandal, it was becoming a national reckoning. And Doyle's name was now synonymous with abuse of power. The governor's office could no longer remain silent. What began as a local controversy had spiraled into national outrage, and Brookhaven's scandal threatened to stain the entire state. Behind closed doors, the governor's advisors debated strategy. "If we defend Doyle, we'll look complicit," one aide warned. "If we condemn her outright, we alienate law enforcement unions." The governor rubbed his temples, knowing indecision would be political suicide. By Monday morning, a carefully worded statement was released. The actions captured on video raised serious concerns about judgment and leadership. "We fully support the ongoing investigation." Though vague, the message sent shockwaves. It was clear, the state was distancing itself from Chief Doyle. Inside police headquarters, the tension was suffocating. Doyle stormed through the halls, barking orders, demanding loyalty. Yet, her officers' eyes told another story, fear mixed with quiet relief. Many longed for her departure, though few dared say it aloud. At the courthouse, Judge Hall received unexpected visitors, federal officials. "We want you to know," one of them said gently, "that the Department of Justice is monitoring the situation closely. What happened to you is not just a personal insult, it's a constitutional matter." Hall listened carefully, then replied with measured calm, "If justice is to mean anything, it must apply even to those who wear the badge." That statement hit headlines within the hour. Editorial boards praised him. "A man of law, standing above vengeance," one article read. For Doyle, it was a nightmare. Her name was dragged across every network, every headline. The governor, the DOJ, the public, all against her. She had once ruled Brookhaven like a queen. Now she stood cornered, watching her empire crumble piece by piece. And the final blow was still to come. The city council chambers were packed, the air electric with tension. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras trained on the long table where Chief Doyle sat stone-faced, flanked by her attorneys. Across from her, council members prepared to vote on a motion that could end her career. The council president began. "Tonight, we decide whether Chief Doyle can continue leading this department in light of her conduct." His voice was calm but firm, echoing in the hushed room. Witnesses testified. First, the teenager whose livestream had sparked it all. "I wasn't trying to start anything," she said nervously. "I just filmed what I saw, a judge treated like a criminal for no reason." Next came community leaders, each speaking with fire. "This is bigger than Judge Hall," thundered Reverend Jacobs. "This is about every citizen who's been silenced, every voice dismissed. Enough is enough." Doyle's lawyers argued fiercely. "This was a single lapse in judgment, not a crime," one insisted. "Our chief has decades of service. Do not erase her career over one incident." But the videos played again on the chamber screens, Doyle's hands gripping the judge's arm, her shove, his calm composure. Gasps echoed, though the footage had been seen hundreds of times before. Finally, Judge Hall was called. He stood, adjusting his glasses. His words were simple, but heavy. "The measure of justice is not how we treat the powerful, but how we treat the vulnerable." On that night, Chief Doyle failed. Not just me, but this city. Silence hung in the chamber. The council president raised his hand. "All those in favor of immediate suspension pending removal, say aye." A wave of voices thundered back, "Aye." And with that single vote, Doyle's empire cracked wide open. The council's vote reverberated through Brookhaven like an earthquake. By morning, every newspaper headline screamed the same message: Chief Doyle suspended. Crowds gathered outside police headquarters, some cheering, others demanding criminal charges. Inside her office, Doyle sat in disbelief. The walls that once showcased her power now felt like a cage. Her badge and service weapon lay on her desk, surrendered as part of her suspension. For the first time in decades, she was stripped of authority. The department moved quickly to steady itself. An interim chief was appointed, a soft-spoken captain respected for his integrity. Officers who had once walked on eggshells now breathed freely. "It feels like a new day," one sergeant whispered. Meanwhile, Judge Hall finally broke his silence at a press conference. Standing at the courthouse steps, he addressed the public. "I have no malice toward Chief Doyle. But accountability is the cornerstone of justice. Without it, our system collapses. My hope is not for vengeance, but for healing. Healing for this city and for the trust that has been broken." The crowd erupted in applause. His words carried the weight of wisdom, transforming outrage into unity. Social media lit up again, this time with praise for his grace. This is what leadership looks like. For Doyle, however, there was no redemption in sight. The state attorney general announced that her case would be referred for possible criminal prosecution: misconduct, assault, abuse of authority. As she left headquarters for the last time, cameras swarmed her. She shielded her face, but the flashes were relentless. Reporters shouted, "Do you regret it, Chief? Do you have anything to say to Judge Hall?" But Doyle said nothing. Her silence, unlike his, carried no dignity, only defeat. Though Doyle had not yet been convicted in court, the trial of public opinion was already underway. News panels dissected every second of the footage, every word she'd spoken at her doomed press conference. Her decades of service were overshadowed by a single night that revealed her true nature. Protesters didn't disperse after her suspension. They grew louder. "Suspension isn't enough," they chanted outside City Hall. "We want justice." The state attorney general confirmed that a grand jury would review the case. Charges could include assault, misconduct, and civil rights violations. The announcement drew cheers from the streets and sent Doyle's legal team into chaos. Her attorneys fought back with spin. "This is political theater," they claimed. "The chief is being sacrificed to appease the crowd," but few bought it. Too many had lived under her reign of intimidation. Old victims began to surface, stepping into the spotlight. A small business owner recalled how Doyle threatened him during a zoning dispute. A mother described how her teenage son had been roughed up by Doyle years ago, the complaint buried and forgotten. Each testimony painted the same picture. Doyle was not a respected leader, undone by one mistake. She had been a tyrant, finally caught. Meanwhile, Judge Hall continued presiding in his courtroom with the same quiet dignity. His workload was heavy, but he never wavered. Colleagues admired his resolve. One clerk remarked, "He's teaching us all what real strength looks like, holding firm without ever raising his voice." National outlets now framed the story not just as Doyle's downfall, but as Judge Hall's rise as a moral authority. Hashtags shifted, from hashtag Doyle must go to hashtag stand with Hall. Her career was over, but his legacy was just beginning to shine brighter than ever. The grand jury's decision came faster than expected. After only 2 days of deliberation, the foreman read the charges aloud: assault, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights under color of law. The announcement echoed through every news channel in the nation. For Brookhaven, it was a watershed moment. Never before had a sitting chief of police faced such charges. Crowds gathered once more outside the courthouse, but this time the chants were mixed with celebration. People danced, sang, and held signs that read, "Accountability won today." Doyle arrived in court flanked by her attorneys, her once commanding stride replaced by a nervous shuffle. Cameras captured every angle, the former queen of the department now reduced to a defendant. The sight alone felt like justice to many who had feared her for years. Inside, Judge Hall did not preside over her hearing. Another judge was appointed to avoid conflict of interest. Still, Marcus Hall's presence loomed large in every discussion. The prosecutor referenced him repeatedly. This was not just an attack on a man. This was an attack on the very principles of justice. The courtroom buzzed as witnesses recounted the night in vivid detail. The teenager who live-streamed it, the bystanders who shouted for her to stop, all stood before the jury. Each testimony tightened the noose around Doyle's reputation. Outside, reporters asked citizens how they felt. An elderly man shook his head. "I never thought I'd live to see the day, but maybe now justice is finally real in this city." For Judge Hall, the trial wasn't about revenge. He quietly told a colleague, "Justice must be impartial. If it isn't applied to those in power, it isn't justice at all." And in Brookhaven, that truth had finally arrived. Months later, Brookhaven looked different. The protests had quieted, replaced with community meetings and forums. Conversations about reform echoed in schools, churches, and town halls. The scandal had not just ended a career, it had sparked a movement. Chief Karen Doyle's trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all counts. She was sentenced to a reduced term due to her years of service, but the judgment was clear. Her abuse of power carried consequences. She left the courthouse in handcuffs, no longer a symbol of authority, but a cautionary tale of unchecked pride. Meanwhile, Judge Marcus Hall's influence grew beyond his courtroom. Invitations poured in from universities and civic groups. He spoke not as a victim, but as a teacher. "What happened to me was wrong, but what we choose to do afterward, that is where justice truly lives." His humility resonated nationwide. Editorials called him the dignity judge. Civil rights groups praised him as a voice of principle in an era of division. For Brookhaven's youth, he became a model of what strength looked like, not in aggression, but in restraint. At the dedication of a new community center, built in the wake of the protests, Marcus addressed the crowd. His voice carried, steady and warm, "Power without accountability is dangerous. But when a community demands better, change is possible. This center belongs to you. It's proof that we will not be defined by fear, but by hope." The crowd erupted in cheers. Children waved signs that read, "Justice wins." As the sun set that evening, Brookhaven felt reborn. The shadows of corruption had been broken by the quiet courage of a man who chose dignity over anger. And in the end, it wasn't Doyle's downfall that defined the city. It was Judge Hall's unshakable grace.